and then put it on YouTube or something. So I don't know, we'll have 12 or 15 people with us in the office to keep it real. And then, it could be anyone watching it.
Yeah, well, I'd already emailed Stephanie about that because I saw it just as I was thinking about it myself, wondering if it might ever be accessible in that way. And then it just came up on Facebook, so I was quite thrilled. Yeah, I'd like to try if I'm not squeezing too much in.
Yeah, Sonia was actually asking me about the workload and how much would be required for the Saturday course. So,
at this point, I think we're going to suggest readings, but we're not planning to really ask people to hand in anything. And we're stripping away all the bureaucracy and just having a long, structured conversation. People can, of course, send in questions. If people want to write something, they can also send it in. But I don't know. I don't know exactly how this will work, Stephanie, and I thought maybe I'd talk it over with you at some point. But really, at this point in time, inshallah, there's no workload.
Yeah, I'm giving Sonia enough work. She has a heavy enough workload with the certificate program, I think. But it would be so complementary to what we're doing that I was telling her that if she feels like she has the time, she should definitely try to listen and participate.
Yeah, that would be lovely. And we'd love to have you on there.
Thank you.
Well, and Sonia, since you're the first person here, is there anything particularly on your mind today? Do you have any questions to get us started while we wait for others to join? I'm already recording, by the way. I figured it might be helpful for others to hear that bit about the Saturday course.
Mm-hmm. All right, Sonia, if you have any questions or comments, this is your hour.
Oh, I think she's frozen right now. Sonia, if you can hear us, you seem to be frozen.
You're frozen in a very nice smile.
It's true, you're smiling, laughing.
What should she do? Should she get off and come back on? Or?
She could. Let me see if she's still here. Oh, okay. She left, so hopefully she's trying to get back on. In the meantime, while we wait for her to get back on, did you want to maybe take a look at one of the questions that I'd sent from earlier?
Yeah, the one that I have uppermost in my mind is the long one about the distressing aftermath of the Indian freedom struggle. And I wanted, first of all, to make a general comment that there are many examples of nonviolence apparently not working. And as a general rule, I recommend that people concentrate on ones that did work first, and kind of get a sense of how they work and what the dynamic is. Then they'll be well positioned to do their own analysis of why one particular movement didn't work. And I think it's important to emphasize that because our tendency today is to just, hopscotch from one disaster to another without understanding what the alternative could be. So that by way of a really general statement. And now about that event in particular, we have to realize that Gandhi started from scratch, and although
Hi. Michael. Oh, are we the only ones?
You are. Sonia. We lost Sonia, so I think she'll be coming back. And I was just asking Michael to respond. So nice to see you.
I hope my cats won't interfere.
And likewise, my dog. You might hear her bark later.
Oh, I see. Okay, then.
But I was just asking, I don't know if you saw Julie's question in the discussion forums. It was a couple of weeks back, and she was asking about the aftermath of after Gandhi died and when there was some violence in the post-partition period in India. And so Michael was just responding to that question. And he was talking about how it's really important for us to initially look at movements that have worked so that we can get a deeper understanding of why they worked before we move on to looking at why movements haven't worked.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, good. But that said, I was going to go on to say that Gandhi really started from scratch, although he had certain advantageous elements in Indian culture that were very helpful. He was starting with a population that was utterly demoralized on the one hand and ready to take to violence on the other hand. So, I mean, we read these statements from people in Gaza today who are saying, you know, we're dying anyway, so we might as well fight back. And he would entirely approve of that. But he himself said that what he was able to achieve was the nonviolence of the weak. In other words, the majority of people went along with him because they thought that he was getting somewhere and they could make it work, not because they thought on principle that this was the best way for a human being to be. So it was not, by his assessment, it was not principled nonviolence, for what we call nonviolence of the strong. So when he was no longer there, and he had already started losing influence after the quit India. Okay. The other thing to take into account is that the British definitely were manipulating the split and widening it between British and Muslims. So most of the devastation that you saw was not caused by Gandhi, but was caused by that cynical manipulation on the part of the British. I guess another factor to take into account here is that hundreds of years ago, Indians were devastated by the destruction of their temples and so forth that were done by the Muslim invasion, which really got started in good earnest somewhere around the 12th, 13th century. And all of their indigenous mechanisms for assimilating foreign peoples were thwarted by the British. They kind of, when they took over the country, it was not possible anymore for them to use the native systems that they had and used thousands of years ago. So it left this festering wound. You know, as a friend of mine in Bethlehem said the other day, it's like lava boiling around under the surface. And so what you saw was a little bit like what you saw in the Balkans. You had people whose, kind of racial and social extreme tensions that they felt against one another were not resolved but held in check as long as Tito was there with his powerful personality, and when he died it all exploded. So, clearly it's one of the most demoralizing things in the whole world of nonviolence, and I think it requires us to understand it and be able to explain to others that what you're seeing was not the operation of nonviolence, but what happened when you had a sort of beginning at nonviolence that was swept away, and all of this hatred boiled over. Yeah, I think that's about how I'd explain it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Renata or Sonia, any additional thoughts on that?
Right. I was thinking that, we tend to look at Gandhi and think that nonviolence is about overthrowing regimes. Well, that's the main thought that occurs to us anyway. And I'm thinking that, we should focus on constructive programs, especially now. Yeah. And I've been hearing lots of people talking about that at least this first generation of nonviolent leaders in the 20th century, it was all about individual leadership, but now we're talking about group leadership. And so things have to be thought in a different way.
Yeah.
And our concern is to build things. So not only, I mean, there is so much to do concerning authoritarian regimes, but now we are, going in a different direction.
Yeah. Personally, I have no objection to powerful leaders like Gandhi and Martin Luther King when we have them, but we clearly cannot reach for them around. I have no ideological opposition to it, as I know a lot of people in the left have, but we clearly cannot let ourselves be dependent on it. And you have a wonderful beginning for a constructive program in Brazil, because you have MST, which it's incredible. They're building whole societies, but they need to match it up with a way to deal with conflict and the attack. And they need to have both. But we say these days, nonviolence is a bird with two wings and a brain. You have to have constructive program, satyagraha, and the wisdom to know when to use which one. So yeah, those are some of the differences, and one of the things I'll be talking about in the course on Saturday is what has happened since Gandhi and King. Which is mostly a lot of good news, actually, a lot of things slowly developing. But the problems that we face are somewhat different, and the resources that we've been developing are somewhat different. One of the biggest pluses since Gandhi and King is the ability for movements to learn from one another. You have people going around and sharing best practices and so forth. And this is at the end of a long, long historical tradition where you have to reinvent the wheel every time something got started. And that was terribly inefficient. And it left us way behind the military establishment. It's very carefully learning and teaching every single little horrible practice that they can come up with. So we're starting to catch up now, and that's a very hopeful development. Stephanie, would you remind me what the other question was?
The other question was generally about science and trying. It was particularly with respect to quantum theory, but I guess any elaboration you have with respect to the science of nonviolence.
Actually, we have just put out a call for a volunteer to help us put together a succinct, user-friendly science page on the Metta website.
Yay!
My point is basically this, that those who espouse violence think that they have a scientific reason for it, and they think that it rests upon a complete model of the universe in which we are separate physical entities, and survival of the fittest and competition rules, that's the way life gets organized. And so I think it's important at some point for some of us to go back and show that that whole model, from atomic theory through evolution onto social science, it was all wrong. And there's an alternative model that goes all the way down to the very nature of what we call, the subatomic world. I fully appreciate that there are some people whose head is spinning from talking my amateurish attempt to share my enthusiasm with quantum theory. I didn't even finish calculus in college, so who am I to talk about quantum? But it's interesting that some quantum physicists are now writing books about the new paradigm. We have a colleague at Berkeley named Henry Stapp, who is a very good quantum theorist, and he just wrote a book called Benevolent Universe, which shows that according to quantum theory, life is not governed by chance, and the universe is really not built upon little pieces of matter, but it's a mental universe that's really constructed out of consciousness. However, having flunked out of medical school and not finished calculus myself, I have every sympathy for people who don't want to get down there that deep, and you don't need to know quantum theory. But I think what is important for each of us to know is the new image of a human being that the new sciences have derived. And Metta is now going around whenever we get a chance and encouraging people to have 5 or 6 main principal points in your mind that we can describe about the human being and the nature of life, and be ready to share these with people who challenge us. So the classic example that always comes up for me is a very wealthy but very good person was invited by Nick Rockefeller to become an economic hitman. And she said, let's go down Guatemala or someplace, wipe out their whole economy, make millions for ourselves. And this person, whose name I can't remember, said, I don't want to do that. And Rockefeller said to him, from the classic, he joined him and said, why do you care about those people? Well, I imagine that Rockefeller probably didn't have anything to say. I would not have had anything to say 10 years ago. I would have said to someone like that, I would have said, well, if you don't understand, I can't explain it to you. But I think it's going to be very helpful for us to be able to explain it. To be able to say, look, there are scientific experiments that show that on the level of consciousness we are deeply interconnected. We even have a network of neurons in our own central nervous system that detects the feeling state of another person. And so if I do something to harm you, I'm actually harming myself. And I'll be able to run through the reasons that both science and wisdom tradition have come up with and make the case. So it's not, we're not supposing that anyone that we talk to will be immediately convinced. But this is advertising. When they've heard it the third time, they'll say, oh, I better jump on board with this. This is finally the real company. So that's why I think science is important, because for some people, if nonviolence does not have a scientific basis, then it isn't real. And above all, our job is to demonstrate that that it isn't real. So we have a message from Sonia now, which is finding it hard to hear me.
Yeah, I can hear some of it. I can hear about 20% of it, and I can sort of fit some of the bits in between.
Well, let's see. Maybe Stephanie, should I try using the microphone on my end?
Yeah. Why don't you do that, and that might help clear things up. Thank you, Sonia, for.
Okay.
So sorry to be a nuisance.
No, not at all.
No. Okay, Sonia, I was gonna draw attention to the same problem. I couldn't hear properly.
Thank you, Metta.
And it is recorded, so hopefully the recording is going well. Yeah. You can tell how well organized I am. Second. Is this better?
seems already better. Yeah.
I think so.
Good. Well, that's all right. I don't care what I look like.
Yeah.
You can join me in being an operator.
By the way, just a little human interest point here. I was remembering the other day when we did our first radio program, Peace Paradigm Radio. Stephanie is the operator, she operates the board. And so I took a picture of her with her earphones and we were working the board. And she sent it to her family, and her mom and dad sent back a message saying, "Way to go, baby girl." So, is that clear what I was saying about science? I was mainly stressing the fact that for a lot of people, science is what a colleague of mine, Willis Harman, once called a knowledge validating system of our civilization. So if something cannot be explained scientifically, it isn't real for those people. And we don't need to argue with them because they can explain nonviolence scientifically. The other aspect of the question, when Gandhi insisted that nonviolence was a science, he meant that it obeys scientific rules. So you can predict and control what would happen when you knew the conditions under which you were behaving. So when they had a campaign that was modestly successful, the success of our efforts was mathematically proportionate to the purity of our efforts. Now, of course, that's a little bit hard to quantify because a lot of it has to do with what's going on inside the human being. And to what extent are you aware of the reality of your opponent as a human being? Do you care for their welfare? To what extent are you able to convert anger and fear when it comes up in you? Those things we do not have a good way of measuring at the moment. But I think what science can prove is that the mental state of one person affects the mental state of another person. There was a famous experiment conducted in Mexico where two people meditate together and then they go into separate rooms. And one of them is shown a very evocative picture, positive or negative, and you're scanning what's going on and what areas of the brain are active. And you're scanning the other person too, who's not seeing the picture. But his brain is going through exactly the same reaction. And then if you take the two people and you put them in what they call a Faraday chamber, I mean a lead-lined chamber, no electromagnetic radiation can escape. It has no effect on the experiment. The transmission still happens. So science can now show, not that many scientists are actually paying attention, but science can show that there is a subtle field of interaction among us all as human beings. And what the mystics have always been saying about all life is one, it's a scientific reality to be proven. So you're probably familiar with this book.
Yeah.
I'll be doing a little reading here in Petaluma.
Oh, it's on my iPad.
Mine's on my next to my bed.
No, it's on my iPad, which is next to my bed. True.
Yeah. We're not. I look forward to the Portuguese translation. Anyway, what I tried to do in there is lay out some principles scientifically that can be tested by experience. And it kind of relates back to our first question, because if we had no way of explaining why everything went to hell in a handbasket in India after Gandhi passed on and the partition happened, we'd be in a difficult position as far as nonviolence is concerned. But I think the fact that we can identify the causal factors that led up to that's very helpful. You know, Kenneth Boulding, who was a great Quaker economist and peace researcher, he had this concept of what he called strains and strengths, that in every conflict situation, there are certain strains that make it difficult to resolve, and there are certain strengths that you can draw upon. And when you know what those are and can weigh them against one another, you can predict quite accurately what the result will be or how much nonviolence you will need in order to resolve that situation. So,
may I add one thing? I watched your course on YouTube, and you once recommended a book, Levels of Satyagraha, and that book was really enlightening, at least to me. Yeah, and there is a movement. It's a worldwide movement in academy mostly, in the at university level. But it's quite, I wouldn't say well known, but it's getting well known here in Brazil. It's called transdisciplinarity, and they try to come up with ancient traditions and spirituality, science, and other approaches to knowledge. They want to bring it together. It's more than interdisciplinarity or anything like that. But anyway, but they talk about one of the pillars is we live in several levels of reality. And that book, Levels of Satyagraha, helped me understand that, because sometimes when Gandhi was talking about Satyagraha, he was talking about, I mean, he was exploring all the levels. It's not only material, so to speak, and in the material aspect, not only political, but there were other things involved. So that's why, to my view anyway, we need to prepare for meditation. We need to have spirituality as the center of all this work, because we are dealing with all these dimensions, not only the physical dimension we live in, but we're talking about something that goes deeper and deeper and wider.
Well, Renata, I would really appreciate it if you could send me something about that development.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think part of Gandhi's genius was to structure things so that a person who would only understand on one level could operate on that level, and the person who understood it a little deeper, they would operate at a different level, but that they would not be at odds with one another. As you could carry out Swadeshi by just boycotting British cloth, burning British cloth and buying khadi, or you could carry it out by asking yourself, what are my strengths and weaknesses as an individual? And there was no conflict between those two levels. So he could use one word and be appealing to different strata of people, which it struck me as kind of remarkable. So I'm glad that was useful for you. That was the Sunlightner book, yes?
Yeah. And I gave a lecture last year about that. Thank you, because it was through you that I got to know this. And people who knew Gandhi, who had already studied Gandhi, but they usually studied through the strategic perspective. They said, wow, I had never thought about that. How come? So not only Satyagraha, but Ahimsa and Swadeshi, from the individual to the global perspective, but also all of these dimensions.
Yeah.
So I try to, based on what you had said, and that book as well.
Yeah, it was when I realized that I started realizing that nonviolence is a whole culture. And it's really a substitute culture. It's probably the substitute culture for the civilization that we have now. And so I got the confidence to say, you should all unplug from the mass media and plug into nonviolence instead, and you'll have a whole new civilization and culture ahead. By the way, now that I mentioned it, that talk that I gave up in CBEC for Fellowship of Reconciliation, it was really rather a good talk, and it kind of comes together very nicely where we're at right now in the Metta Center, what we're thinking of. So I would love it if you people would watch that, and it's a little over an hour, but there's going to be a 58-minute version in soon for public television, but I will. Stephanie, did I send you a link to that? It's on Meta's website.
Yeah. Have I sent that to the group, Renata and Sonia?
You've either sent it or somebody's posted it on the.
It was on Facebook. We may have posted it to the certificate group on Facebook, but I can resend that with the lesson this week because it was a great talk, Michael. And you were on fire. There was a lot of humor. I really enjoyed watching it. You were just, I don't know, you were kind of just rolling. There were a lot of jokes integrated with the wisdom that I really appreciated.
It was a fresh audience, so I knew they hadn't heard these jokes before.
Yes, it was like hearing them for the first time. But I can definitely send that to the group this week.
Invite people to comment, because that's our message right now.
Yeah.
We'd like to really feel confident that everybody is behind it, with whatever changes we feel are necessary. Okay. So other comments, questions? Yeah? Could be anything.
Well, yes. Right. I was thinking, if Gandhi lived today, what would the challenge be? Because we're living in it's a globalized world, so the forces we have to oppose to and conquer and bring to our side, they're not only national forces, they're international too. So as I look at corporations here, they are not national, they are international ones. And so how do we bring them? Because it's a large scale work. I see the challenge as being so big. I wouldn't know how to, I have a few ideas, but.
Yeah. No, it's very difficult to know where to start. You probably all know, I just came back from Israel and Palestine, and it's been quite hard. 3 people were shot in a town that I visited a couple of weeks ago, and when you go look at the email and you hear yourself saying, "Oh my God, I hope it wasn't my friend." It's very different, and the problems do look absolutely enormous. And I know what's going on over there is that you have good people on the ground who are doing good programs to reconcile Jews and Arabs, but then those programs don't go anywhere. So we have to be able to build that step where the reconciliation and the refusal to be enemies, that's a tweak, by the way. Jews and Arabs refuse to be enemies. But they then can actually see their mindset being translated into an institution, into a policy. So I think at least this has helped me understand where we need to live. We need everywhere to have that infrastructure of the constructive program that you're referring to. Not only we have to have the organic farms and the intentional communities and the spiritual practice. We have to have that all going. But then we also have to think, how do we translate this into a new world? Because it's not going to happen by itself. But I'm absolutely convinced that it can happen. And I have a strong feeling by now, this will not be a surprise to any of you, I have a strong feeling that the mass media are playing an extremely unhelpful role, and that has to be circumvented somehow. So one of Stephanie's counterpart, our communication director in India, has come up with a kind of 2-pronged program to train especially young people. She's talking to large groups of young people in South Africa for a starter. Train young people how to create their own media and how to be media literate and teach them about nonviolence. And then train journalists how to recognize nonviolence when they see it. I feel that that's a really important component that's going to help us get from these small experiments, which are basically doing the right thing, to finding new culture. And I'd be happy to share with you a novel that here in California in November is going to be a proposition on a ballot which will call for a constitutional amendment, an amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which will say, in effect, that only a natural person can be considered a person with law. My friends in the movement say only a person is a person, and every person is a person. And that's going to be on California's ballot, and I think there are 9 other states that are doing similar things. So if we could overturn Citizens United, we would be turning back that insane corporatization and dehumanization of life. Because after all, if a corporation is the same life as a person, then we're better than a corporation. We're losing our humanity. And I think one of the things that's going for us right now is that people aren't happy being dehumanized. Something inside them, every one of us, something inside us says, no, this isn't right. And so when something comes along that offers an alternative where you can respect your humanity, I think that people will jump on that bandwagon. And somehow that connects in my mind with these people in Gaza who are saying, we're dying here slowly anyway, so we might as well die with dignity, fighting back for our rights as human beings. That's at least a partial answer. It will kind of give us a direction in which we can think. Other than that, it's a big job for all of us. And I'm very happy about Roadmap. It has, I think Roadmap has reached a point now where wherever we present it, people like it. So the next step is for you to actually do something. So we're finishing this conference, and one of the people from the first version of this course, Anna Mitsuko Ikeda, is helping us put together a very user-friendly package on the web so that if you like Roadmap and you want to join it, you can sign on and get involved in the conversation. And then we hope to carry that to the third stage, which is the strategic plan. We're going to offer to the entire movement a plan, a strategy for how to go forward. I see we have a cat now who's joining the conversation.
I think it's a great idea. Yeah, I've already volunteered. Stephanie knows that, to translate the work in Portuguese into Portuguese.
Obrigado.
De nada. I'm very enthusiastic about it.
Good. That's excellent. And we have a Spanish language person who's working on it right now.
Yeah, so I saw.
Yeah, maybe I should connect you, Renata, with Erica, and because I imagine how she's translating it, something similar could be done in Portuguese, or it might make sense to sort of follow the steps that she's making. So I can definitely connect the two of you.
It might even be the case, I'm not sure about this, but yeah, it might even be the case that if she's done something in Spanish, it'd be pretty easy to go from Spanish to Portuguese.
Yeah.
But in some cases, that could be really helpful. There might be nuances that we lose along the way. But I'll leave that up to you to decide.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a whole hemisphere. We'll have it in their native language. And this, of course, includes Australia.
I can hear now. Yeah.
Oh, that's too bad. It looks like Sonia can't hear us either.
I can hear a little bit. I think it has got a bit, but yeah, I got the gist of what you were saying. The importance, the translation, the importance of that.
Yeah, and as I say, Sonia, it's all being recorded, so if you don't mind, spending the time to go through it again.
Thank you so much for your time.
Do you have any other questions or comments while we're here?
I was going to mention, but you kind of have already covered it, perhaps as much as you can, really, without being so instructional. But as somebody who lives in the UK and sees all, I mean, I don't watch the news, but the thing that I see is things on Facebook, and it just seems really strange to me to be going about my normal daily life, which is really, I'm privileged to be quite comfortable in my normal daily life, and for all this to be going on in the world. And apart from my own practice of meditation and doing this course and being passionate about the whole non-violence as a way of life, what practical steps can we take realistically? Because I sign various petitions through Amnesty, and I've been involved with some suggestion of going on marches and demonstrations and things like that, particularly in relation to Gaza situation. But I just don't know if there's something more practical that we can do, rather than just, I don't know, it just feels so strange to just be carrying on, but I know we've got to, but I just don't know if there's any advice that
Well, we all feel pretty boxed in and frustrated, and one thing I would say, Sonia, is we four are all from that privileged world. And I think it's important for us not to feel guilty about that, but to look upon it through the lens of Gandhi's trusteeship. In other words, these are capacities that we've been given, and we commit ourselves to using them in the most efficient way possible. I think we don't need to bother about it anymore. Now, we are starting to put back into Metta website some thoughts about nonviolence in daily practice. And I think basically, so we are going to be developing that, and we'd like to hear from you about any experiments that you're carrying out and how they work.
Okay.
But in fact, I think you'll have full access to it. You can just post those things yourself. But I know one, what was I going to say? Whoops. Kind of skipped my mind. I do think that if we can all come up with one thing that all of us can do, knowing our own strengths and weaknesses, that's important. There's this concept in Sanskrit of swadharma, knowing exactly what your dharma is, requires you knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are. Yeah. We be aware of that and think, where can I fit myself in? And it's always impressed me very much how Gandhi had one practice that everybody could do. It didn't matter what stratum of society they were in. So you could be a lawyer in the High Court of India, but you still would go and spend half an hour spinning. So for years, in the Metta Center, we've been looking for what is the new spinning wheel. And I feel that the thing that I was just mentioning about having a succinct version of the new story in our mind and being able to explain it and write about it is probably, it's something that we can all do, and cumulatively it could have a really strong level, like an effect that would change the paradigm. And I know that Stephanie Van Hook has just finished an article this morning after not being able to sleep all night about the human image, which becomes the focal point for us. And I'm really looking forward to seeing it because she thought it was a very, very powerful thing. So, she has that ability to put out a very good piece of writing. Other people, like we have a friend who just organized a march from Los Angeles to Sacramento, which was quite a long march, and they had 27 arrests along the way, and they think they had a very significant impact in getting that proposition in the ballot that I just mentioned to you, of changing the U.S. Constitution. So there's spectrums of things that we can do, and I think what we're trying to do with the roadmap is get it all to cohere, so that it's all one. Everything that we're doing really has the effect of summing up to a single impact. That's what's been missing so far. I'm sorry, every time you ask a question, it takes me about 10 minutes to answer it.
I think that's my gut feeling is that
Uh-oh.
Sonia, unfortunately you were breaking up. Do you want to try to put it in the chat box? Why don't you write it out and put it in the chat box? Yeah.
I just have to get a pen because there's this brainstorm of ideas. 1 second.
Remember to take your earphones out.
Right.
And it looks like your connection might be back, Sonia. If you want to try talking, you're not frozen anymore. Oh, maybe not. No, we can't hear you.
She's not looking at us either.
No, but it looks like she's typing. Okay. So sorry, technology about to let me down. I believe your answer was change inwards for ocular benefit.
I think Gandhi would have liked that. Can you hear us, Sonia? Yeah. Yeah, I think that Gandhi would have liked that. That's the first step anyway. We would ask ourselves honestly and repeatedly, what can I do? What weaknesses should I be working on to overcome? And what strengths should I be developing? And at what point should I work with other people in a community? For example, when we were talking about roadmap in San Francisco a while ago, I was talking about the Strategic Council. There was one fellow who's very, very committed activist who struggling with the Guantanamo issue, and he said, "Well, that wouldn't be for me. I'm not a good strategic thinker." And we all felt fine about that. It's not like everybody has to do the same thing, but we all have to be part of the same tapestry. Well, I mean, sometimes we run into trouble because there's this ideology that nobody should be superior to anyone else, and that gets translated into nobody should be different from anybody else, which is impossible. Each of us is unique. So I think once we get over that idea and can develop our own best capacities and find a way that they all amount to one big project, I think we'll have, I actually think that we will have unstoppable power to do that.
So Sonia says, I will definitely continue fervently to kindly work with my weaknesses and utilize my strengths to complement the rest of society in a nonviolent future.
Well said, Sonia. Well, you're going to use that. That's in fact, you inspired me so much, I'm going to do that myself. Good. So,
I was thinking. Oh, sorry.
Go
Would you
ahead
like
and.
to? Okay. I was thinking about because this week we're working on constructive program, and what Gandhi found out about why you're doing constructive program. You're also finding out about your own capabilities, and that feeds constructive program. And then I remember the time when I was at an ashram, and once a week we did karma yoga, and then we would begin the morning by gathering the whole community, and then the facilitator would read a passage of the Gita or any other spiritual book, and then then she would pose a question, a reflective question, so that we would bring that question throughout the day, and we would explore that question while we were doing karma yoga, and then we would get together in the middle of the afternoon for half an hour, about an hour actually. So we would write in our journals about our findings, and then we would get together and share our experiences. And then all the work taught us that we were not the doer, we were doing that for, well, something else, something bigger. So what was that? Because people there usually they call themselves spiritual, but they came from different traditions. So it was a great exercise of, learning about yourself and learning about how to live in the community and what the community really needed. But there was that inspiration.
Thank you. We're doing a workshop, a retreat actually this weekend at the Mount Madonna Center called Buddha and the World Crisis. And we are looking for formats for workshops. So I think that's really something for us to consider. And if you have some kind of a write-up about it, Nagler, if you could add that along quite a workload you're getting here today.
Yeah.
What happens when you show up at office hours?
Oh my. Right. I can do it.
Good. And Renata, I did want to emphasize that our friend and board member Gilda Betancourt is really a wonderful person. I've known her for probably 15, 20 years, and she speaks Portuguese fluently, being from an Azorean family. And if I can't come down, I don't think we'll be disappointed with Gilda. Well, that's just about the end of our hour. So,
Any final thoughts?
Gratitude.
Yeah. And let's, if we have any time that we are praying or meditating today, or writing our mantra or anything, I would request that we please send it to people of Gaza.
I think we can all definitely do that today.
Okay, well, thank you in turn. It's been...
Namaste.
Namaste. And thank you all so much for coming. This was such a lovely, intimate office
Till next
hour.
time.
Till next time. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.